I'm not normally one to complain about people breaking COVID rules, but our Prime Minister spent many, many months bringing down Boris Johnson over Partygate, and it's only fair now that Sir Keir Starmer faces the same scrutiny. Breaking today is the sensational claim that Keir Starmer spent Christmas Eve in 2020, the height of the COVID pandemic, getting vocal lessons from acting coach Leonie Mellinger at Labour's headquarters in central London. As Guido Fawkes reports today, there are at least a few problems with this. On Christmas Eve in 2020, the UK was in a tiered system of regional COVID lockdowns. At that time, Labour HQ was located in Southside, Victoria Street, central London. In Tier 4, the government imposed restrictions, including, quote, everyone must work from home unless they are unable to do so. Guido went on, even if you concede Starmer's voice coach couldn't have worked from home, this would be inconsistent with an account from a previous training session recounted in a book that Mellinger joined a voice training session by phone in April 2020, so they had previously worked remotely. The other issue is that Starmer's voice/com/acting coach was considered so essential that she qualified as a key worker during COVID. Now, look, I don't know about you, but I seem to remember key workers being those who were absolutely pivotal to the continuation of society, not least so people could keep working. Doctors, nurses, train drivers, teachers, the police. I know Boris Johnson infamously called Sir Keir Starmer the human bollard, but surely the Labour leader's ambition to find a bit of character could have waited until after an apparently deadly pandemic had passed. This is the actress in question, Leonie Mellinger, who was previously pictured at Labour HQ. Today she's been proudly retweeting the Sunday Times piece that credited her with allegedly improving Starmer's public performances. This apparent rule breach from Sir Keir Starmer came during a much more serious time of COVID than his Beergate drama in Durham. Do you remember that? Where he and Labour colleagues, including Angela Rayner, gathered for lagers and curries. Remember this? There he was, the leader of the opposition at the time, swigging from a bottle, raising concerns that he wasn't working at all. He was actually eventually given the all clear by Durham police for that meeting. He got away with it. But all of this matters because Keir Starmer was the first person during COVID to demand the government went harder and faster with draconian rules. And he proudly boasted how we should all stick together and stick to them, regardless of how insane they were.
You cannot be a lawmaker and a lawbreaker. And it's time to pack his bags.
There's always a tweet, isn't there, or a receipt to go back to. The Shadow Paymaster General, Richard Holden, has written to the PM today to demand an investigation into this new voice coach scandal. He wrote, "It's clear from these revelations that not only have you misled the public, but you had a casual disregard for the law." And we are, I'd like to say now, reliably informed tonight there could be further developments on this story during the week, so it's definitely one to look out for. Let's get the thoughts now of my panel. GB News contributor Will Kingston, political commentator Chloe Dobbs and the former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Good evening to you all. Thank you for your company.
Evening.
Stephen, I guess we start with you.
Thanks for that. That's a hospital pass, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is. What's going on here? For me, it seems like there's questions for the Prime Minister to answer here. What's your take?
Well, this is Patrick Maguire's book and Gabriel Pogren's book, which has been serialised in one of the papers today. And it's got a lot of stuff in it. And Leonie Mellinger's obviously getting a fair bit of publicity out of it. Now, look, Keir Starmer said, no, without any equivocation, if the police found him guilty and he was received an official caution or any form of judgment, he would resign. Yeah. I'd imagine he'd do the same thing now because you cannot say he's anything other than a man who obeys the law.
Well, there we go. And we have that clip a bit later in the show. We'll get it for you. But he did say, as you just said, Stephen, if I am fined by the police for Beergate, he was called Cormac here, Beer here at the time.
Whatever,
He got away with it. He did say, as you said, I'll resign. So you think now, even though he's Prime Minister, he would still resign?
As far as I'm concerned, that from what I know of the man, if this is a real breach of the law and if he is found guilty of it, then he would certainly consider his position.
I highly doubt that. Absolutely.
I don't doubt it for a minute.
Keir Starmer, after only 6 months into being Prime Minister, just going to let it all go, step down because of this.
But you honestly... let's find out.
He didn't resign when we had the whole Lord Ali saga. They thought they'd gotten away with that.
What crime was committed then?
It was a crime of hypocrisy.
Sorry, that's not a crime in the statute, but what crime? What crime?
The Labour Party...
You can't answer, can you?
...the Tories time and time again for cronyism.
What crime?
They then did... I'm not saying that there is a crime.
You did. You just said that. You said the...
the crime of hypocrisy.
Okay,
I'm not saying he committed a crime then.
Well, you just did.
The problem...
He did not step down when there was huge hypocrisy and they were under immense fire there.
So what's the read across? This is apples and oranges, different things.
Lord Ali, and now with this, you think he's going to resign from this? No.
Will, what's your thoughts?
The problem is that he's built his brand on being a rigid rule follower. He doesn't have anything else. He doesn't have a competent start. He doesn't have any charisma. He doesn't have much else to speak of. So he's built this whole brand on being a man of the law. And so these things just continue to chip away at the perception that he is indeed what he says he is, on the tin.
Hang on, Will. You say he's got no charisma. He's been getting acting and voice and comms coaching. You're saying it's not worked?
Well, Stephen said that...
She clearly didn't do a very good job.
said Leonie's getting a lot of publicity for this particular...
Well, don't forget...
I would suggest that she needs to get this off her CV pretty quickly because the comms from Keir Starmer is still woeful.
Well, apparently she did the first bit down the line. How can you do a voice coach by voicemail? It seems bizarre.
Oh, can I just say, though, Stephen probably is the best placed source to say... Keir Starmer will stick to his guns and resign, surely. I mean, he's a former Labour MP, Stephen. How many years?
Yeah, 22 years.
Still mixed within Labour circles?
Yeah, of course I do.
You think he would resign?
What I think, if he is found guilty of a crime by the police and charged and convicted, I cannot imagine for a minute he would stay in office.
I think he will get away with it because I think everyone is sick of COVID. All of these old COVID stories, we just want to kind of put it at the back of our minds and just be done with it. I think this is one he will actually be able to stay out of.
Sorry, there's no statute of limitations here, and I hope that the law is blind. If a crime's been committed, it doesn't matter if it's 15, 20 years.
We're in violent agreement.
One thing to point out that you mentioned he is a lawyer and... COVID legislation, it was messy. Lockdown rules, they were put together so quickly. The law was confusing for general members of the public. But Keir Starmer, he can't use the excuse that he didn't know the rules and didn't understand the law when he himself is a lawyer. So it's going to be hard for him to excuse himself.
I think you are right when you talk about the crime of hypocrisy. Even if he does get away with it, which I think he probably will, he's Teflon, it's the rank hypocrisy. A man who led an opposition week after week in Parliament saying we want harder and faster lockdowns, we want more draconian measures, skirting the rules. And the key point here, Steve, is Starmer, by his own admission, was deciding who was a key worker during COVID. A key worker on the government's own website, the advice was people who would continue, allow people to continue working, who are essential to the continuation.
He wasn't the Prime Minister. He wasn't making those rules. Look, when you talk about
he decided himself, according to Leonie Mellinger,
of course he did.
speaking to the Times today, Keir Starmer decided that she was a key worker.
He was not, but Keir Starmer was not in any position of authority at the particular time. He was an opposition MP, the same as I was.
Precisely. So why is he making the rules?
But look, when you said about going in hard, the people who are going in hard were people like Chris Whitty, there were people like Matt Hancock. They were the people who are going in hard. And I think you make a very good point, Chloe, that it was incredibly confusing. At the time, you had Tier 3, Tier 4, you could meet 5 metres apart, all that business. It was confusing. But I don't think that's an excuse. And I think that let's get, as I think you once said, sunlight is the best disinfectant on this one. So let's get this disinfected in the sunlight. And let's actually work out what actually happened here instead of what people said that other people might have said.
Yeah, well, my only concern is that, a lot of people, the establishment, the mainstream media, they don't want sunlight on these kind of issues because
they can't dodge it.
Starmer is one of them. He is the establishment.
But they can't dodge it, mate. They can't duck it and they can't dodge it. That sunlight is coming.
Well, I think this is going to look bad for Keir Starmer either way because if he ignores Richard Holden's letter and doesn't answer Richard Holden's question and launch an investigation, that's going to look very weak. But at the same time, if he is investigated and we find out that he did break the rules, that's also going to look pretty bad for him. So it's a lose-lose.
Will, last word?
This could actually be some just further ammunition for other members of the Labor Party with leadership aspirations. Just add it into the repertoire.
Well, in this book, Civilisation, Angela Rayner was mooting, Stephen, wasn't she? A leadership coup in 2021 after that catastrophic by-election loss in Hartlepool to Boris Johnson.
Well, if you actually read the Gabriel Pogrund and Patrick Maguire's book, I mean, there were actually 3 players on the pitch here. I mean, Angela Rayner said she'd got momentum lined up, she got the unions lined up, Len McCluskey, they were going to have 5,000 people at a rally, and at the same time you had Rachel Reeves's people and Wes Streeting's people. This happens in politics, I'm afraid. Do you know how many people there are at the moment on manoeuvres in the Tory party? Probably just as many as there are MPs.
Well, I guess you could argue they're slightly less irrelevant than less relevant than the Labour Party. And just, Stephen, just to add before we move on, we all know Matt Hancock was a snake, so there we go. Will, Chloe, Stephen, thank you very much.
You're a breath of fresh air, mate. You really are.
The 5 is in the post. Right, how about stuff?
Am I that cheap?